Yeah, the those new rules ain't gonna affect me any, um, because I don't make any money off my videos. But I was reading that they think some people are making some pretty good money off their YouTube channels and so forth. This is going to impact them. So I'm not sure if I understand enough about it to say how it would impact them really. Oh, something that if you're you got to mark your kids whether they're okay for or your videos whether they're okay for kids or not. Um, I suppose that way that there's browsers then that maybe won't bring up things that are inappropriate for children. And if I understand it right, if your videos are approved for kids, you can't have advertisements. Is that right, Kyle? Do you know? Uh, So I guess if you make all your money off of kids, then then you can't have the advertisements unless you mark them that they're not for kids, and then your kids won't be watching them. So I don't know. Something to do with the government. Some I don't even remember what the law is that they passed. But I just wasn't very happy yesterday when things were broke. I was trying to figure them out. Okay, let's continue on in this chapter. This is talking about understanding Java statements. So busy worrying about YouTube, I forgot to bring up NetBeans. Um, okay, as you may recall from chapter 1, Java statement is a complete unit of execution in Java terminated with a semicolon. Now we got control flow statements that break up the flow of execution by using decision making, looping, and branching, like whiles, fors, if, if else, so forth. Um, these statements can be applied to a single expression as well as a block of Java code. That's weird. Block of code in Java is a group of 0 or more statements between balanced braces. I don't think I ever tried to put 0 statements in an if statement. Not sure why you'd want to. Hmm. Here's the if then, which we've seen. You got if and then Boolean expression here, and then your lines of code in here, and you got braces surrounding it, so beginning and ending. Um, if you have one line of code, you do not need the braces. They don't hurt anything, but you don't need them. For example, this one. This is checking for the hour of day. If it's less than 11, then it's doing this one line of code here, printing out good morning. If you got more than one line of code, then you put your braces. So if hour of day is less than 11, then print out good morning and morning greeting count plus plus. So it's increasing that by one. One area the exam writers will try to trip you up on is an if else or if then statements without braces. For example, take a look at the slightly modified form of our example. Based on the indentation, you might be inclined to think that this is being done also, but it's not. The only thing that's being done is the system out.println. Remember that in Java, unlike some other programming languages, tabs are just white spaces and are not evaluated as part of the execution. Wonder how many there are. Python's the only one I know of that uses tabs, the spacing for the indentation to indicate block of code. Like if this was in Python, assuming there was a colon here, well, these would have to be different, of course, but this indentation here would mean both of these would be done under that if statement, but not in Java. Your if then else. If hour of day is less than 11, you do this line of code here. And then if hour of day is greater than equal to 11, then you do this line of code. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but this does encompass all the possibilities. So you can change that to an if this, else this. Now you might say, well, where's the then? You know, why do they call it an if then if there's no then? Well, the early programming languages, let's see, new class. Would have if I is equal to 3, then and then and else. Like this. Of course, my indentation is horrible. But there was an then as part of that. I think it's still in Visual Basic. It was in the original Basic. Some of the earlier languages all had then, and then at some point they thought, well, why have that? You know, it's implied, and so they got rid of the then. And what doesn't it like about that? Legal starter type, symbol class I. That's interesting. Brace, 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 brace. Too many braces. Better go home if I can't do a simple if statement. System.out.println. What? What am I missing there? Capital I. Double. Let's try double. Oh, I've deleted my main. Okay, never mind. Actually, we're going to put that back in. So I have one to copy. I think I have one to copy. Okay, let me go over here then. Frame, fractions. Better just learn to memorize that. There we go. By the way, that isn't what the issue is. You can't have an then at the end. But that'll continue on. In every book, they'll refer to a then, and the then is implied now, unless you're in Visual Basic. And we've already talked about this. This checks to see if this is true. If it's true, it does this, and then goes to the end. If this is not true, it comes down to the else, and then does this, and then goes to the end of the curly bracket. They just replace the that second if statement with an else. Now you can have them nested if then statements. So if this, else if this, else if this, else if this, and then an else at the end. So you can have a variety of them like that. Oftentimes you want to do that if this is one of your cases, then if this is one of your cases down here, and then this is your default case. If they have nothing to do with each other, then you don't want to put them into together like that. For example, if we have this, and then I do an else if I num5 or I num is greater than 2. If I num3 and I num2 really have nothing in common, then they shouldn't be put together. So you don't nest them like that. They should be separate if statements. Now, if you have things that really do logically go together, like you got sales and you got costs, commission. Let's say sales equal 10,000, cost is equal to 2,000. And you're checking if sales is greater than 8,000, we're going to potentially give a commission. Now, if we're going to do a check on the cost, we don't do it on the same level as the F. We have it embedded in here, and you don't have to have it in braces even. If you say if cost is less than 2,500, that means they kept their cost down. Then our commission is going to equal 10% of sales. Sales commission, whatever that's spelled wrong. You should have found what parsing. I don't like the way they put the braces here at the end because I don't see it. My eyes aren't that good. I really do like it on a separate line so I can just easily see them line up. And these I can easily see line up. And these I can easily see line up. For me, that saves me time in programming. So I'm not sitting there scratching my head wondering when I'm getting the errors like the one you just saw. I can visually see if things are going. Now these appear to be two separate items, but they're related. And so I can embed them like that. Now, you might say, why didn't you just do an and there? You could have, but it could be down here. I want to give them a commission no matter what. In that case, it'd be better to put them as a separate if else within the sales is greater than 8,000. You might say, well, why don't you do something like this? If sales is greater than 8,000, I don't remember if it's two ands or one. We'll see. We'll try two of them. I think it's one. And cost is less than 2,500. I'm just drawing a blank here, I guess. Legal start type. Missing a closing brace again. Even after I made a big pronouncement about lining them up. There we go. Problem with this is it works, but then you start having to put all the other conditions. If sales is greater than 8,000 and cost is greater than or equal to 2,500. And then you got an LCF. Sales is less than 8,000 and you got the cost is less than 2,500. And you got so many conditions in. This just makes it easier to see because you see if sales is greater than 8,000, okay, so this entire block right here is based upon that. I don't have to think about that fact at all anymore. And I can focus just on the costs and how that relates to the commission. But I suppose that's a matter of programming preference. Let's see. If hours a day is less than 15, good afternoon. This is poor programming code. When I saw the hour of day less than 15, I was thinking it says good afternoon. Well, what if the hour of day is 3? It's going to print good afternoon. And that's what they're indicating. If you got hour of day is 3, it comes down here. This is true. So it does this line of code right here. And then after it does that line of code, it comes and drops down after this last curly brace down here, which I can't highlight, but down here. A better way to do this would be to flip these two around. So if hour of day is less than 11, then you say good morning. Else, if hour of day is less than 15, you say good afternoon. Else, you say good evening. Now, you might say, well, Shouldn't they maybe be separate or something like that? No, if I put this first, then if it's less than 11, like 3, it'll go ahead and say good morning and then drop down out of the brace. So it'll never get to the hour less than 15. Now, I don't need to put hour of the day is less than 15 and hour of day is greater than or equal to 11 because that's implied in the way the if statement is set up. Drink. And it says nothing. If you do take that test, they try to throw you up as they don't put a Boolean condition in here. They just say X. And that's confusing because if you use other programming languages do allow it. I don't think Java does. If not, let's 5 system.out print line. What? It's equals right here. Java does not allow it. You have to put that to 2 equals, but other programming languages do allow it. And this, Boolean wise, what do you think that would return in other programming languages? That would always return true. And that has caused me more headaches in other programming languages because I'd forget to put the equals on it, and I just put 1 equals, and it wouldn't give me any error, and it would always work because no matter what, it's true. So this would always be running, and I'd be sitting there scratching my head why it's always running. Another thing that Java prevents, which is kind of nice, is other program languages. If you put maybe I'm lying to you. It doesn't catch that. You should never have a semicolon there. No programming language should allow it. It's never would never be an option. If I run this, I spend a lot of time on this stuff too. Prints what? Close that one. Close that one. Okay. So no matter what, it'll print what? It's because this semicolon here ends the if statement, so it checks to see if it's true or false, and then doesn't do anything else, which doesn't make any sense for programming. I spent a lot of time looking for those errors before too. This has caught me more times than I'd care to admit. I think Java doesn't allow it. I guess it does allow it. Yeah, it does. You should never put a semicolon after a for like that or a while. Now, I used to, way back when, use that for a reason. Like I'd put for int x equals 1, continue while x is less than something, x plus plus. For int y equals 1, y is less than y plus plus for int z is equal to 1. Z is less than some number. And I put a semicolon. What this would do is it would basically pause your program. It would delay the execution. In the process, if it's a regular computer, it also slowed the computer way down. So it wasn't a good pause. This was back before I knew anything about API calls. And Windows has an API call such that you can set a timer event. And a lot of programming languages have that availability too. So you can set a timer so that your program pauses for 5 seconds, 10 seconds without impacting the machine. If you have another process running over here that's really kind of separate, maybe you want to wait till this one finishes until you continue on. But this is hardly ever done anymore. But that's probably where it's left over from. But yeah, never had that there. The fact that they're putting in there, they're not probably checking to see if you know that a Boolean operator has to have 2 equals. They're probably checking to see if you know whether it works in Java or not, whether that returns a true or doesn't do anything. And they say that. Statement may be valid in some other programming languages and scripting languages, but not in Java, where 0 and 1 are not considered Boolean values. And that's true. I've noticed that in my programming Java this semester especially. You cannot set a Boolean equal to 0 or a Boolean equal to 1, but other languages you can. There isn't some universal criteria for what a programming language has to do. You designed it yourself. I think I mentioned in this class, might have been another class, where I took a compilers class. And that's probably the class where I enjoyed the most because I wrote my own compiler. Wrote like my own Java or Visual Basic type of deal. Now it was a very scaled down version of it. I never did give it a name. I should have called it David 1.0 or something. But that was fun. I decided everything how it was going to be designed. And you could write your program in David 1.0 and compile it and create an executable. So Java class, hardest class I think I ever took. I spent more time on that than any class. But it was very satisfying. Satisfying. Okay, a ternary operator. Then we discussed if, then, else. We got the ternary operator. And a lot of programming languages have this. I don't really like it, but you're welcome to use it. It's kind of taking an if else structure and putting it all in one line. So we got our Boolean expression, then question mark, and then expression, and then colon and expression. So like this right here. They got this as a regular if else. If I want to rewrite that as a ternary operator, let's see, int y is equal to 10, int x, and may not get this right because I don't do this very often. There's my Boolean. I might have to have parentheses around it. Then I think it was a question mark. And then my x equals 2 times y, colon, and then my x equals 3 times y. Yeah, I might not even be close. Parentheses. Okay, if this doesn't work, we'll look at actually how you're supposed to do it. Oh, this got something wrong. Like I say, I don't use it. It sure seems like the Boolean expression. I'd almost think you don't have the x equals, but they'd have to know which variable to assign it to. So let's see how they do it. X equals up front. And then get rid of those. I was wondering about the x equals on that. I just didn't know where else you'd put it. So this checks if y is greater than 5, if that's true, then x will equal to this. Else, x is equal to this. Now, as I understand it, you notice their form here says expression. Doesn't say expressions, does it? It's helpful to add parentheses. Okay. Here we got, what is this one? System.out print line. Y is greater than 5. If that's true, then I print 21. Otherwise, I print zebra. But this one, since I'm assigning it to an integer animal, if y is less than 91, I have it equal to 9, which is okay. Animals equal to 9. Otherwise, animals equal to horse. And horse is a string, then you can't assign a string to an integer. Although you could probably change this. Although it still won't work, but you can either change this to be a 9 here, then string there, capital S. Oh, y is not defined. Okay. Y is equal to 21. So you can change it so they match, like that. What is it? Integer dot parse. System.out.println animal. Just curious what it'll give us. An error. Is that a little red curly under there? What's it say? Cannot find symbol. Integer dot parse int. Try that again. 241. Number format exceptions the error gives us. We're going to be looking at Java exceptions and how to trap that before the end of the semester. something you have to worry about. Because if you develop especially a GUI application where you're asking them to input a number, and instead of putting the number in, they put horse in, you're going to try to convert it to an integer, and it's going to blow up. You might say, well, nobody does that in real life. You'd be surprised what people do. Calls I would used to get. They'd call me up, say, yeah, your program blew up. It blew up because I didn't program it correctly. I should have done error catching better. But maybe it showed an error message before it blew up. An error message would say the number has to be less than 10. And they'd call and say, yeah, I run your program and it crashed, it blew up. And I said, well, what error message did you get? And I said, the number should be less than 10. And I said, well, what number did you input? Well, I input in 25. So it's like you're looking at the phone. It's just like you can't use my program anymore. I'm sorry. But those are the calls you get. You learn extreme patience in programming when you're working with people. Some people are just so computer illiterate, even nowadays. It's just shocking. Let's see. This you can read more about the ternary expression evaluation. I don't really like it, so let's see what this does. Y is 1. So it's checking if this is true. It is. So it increased y by 1. So y be 2. Okay, comes down here. Y is 2. And it's concatenating that with the comma and then the value of z, which is 1. Now it puts 2, 1. See, I didn't know that would work that way. So that's interesting. Other programming languages, you can't do that because you've got one that's an integer and you got one that's a string and then you got another one that's an integer, and you can't put pluses between them. You have to actually convert them. But it looks like system.out.println is designed that way. Down here, y is equal to 1, z is equal to 1. This is checking, well, y is greater than or equal to 10, which it isn't. So it comes here and it increases z by 1. So it does the else. So z would equal 2. And so then that outputs 1, 2. Okay. Now the next thing is the switch statement. I'm not a real big fan of switch statements. They're called case statements in other languages. And some they call it both names. You see, you got the switch statement, and it talks about a case statement at the end of that highlighting. In some programming languages, the switch case statement is so limited down that you can only use a certain primitive data type with it. A lot of times it's related to integer, and that's what this says. Specifically byte, short, character, or integer. And this is prior to Java 5.0. That's all this could do. Where they really benefit you is where you can have it equal to string values, which is what this is doing. So based upon some kind of variable, you're going to come down here and check to see what it's equal to. So it's almost like an if this variable to test is equal to this expression, then do the code right here. And then breaks you out of that and goes down to the bottom. And then the default down here is if none of the above is true, then you do this. Okay, I'm not very good with switch statements because switch case because I don't use them that much. But let's try to do one. Say my grade. Hopefully it handles doubles. Switch grade. Hmm. Parentheses are on it. And case. Be a colon. Greater than or equal to 90. System dot out dot print line greater than 90. And then curly brace at the end for ending. And constant expression doesn't allow that. I'll put 80. Okay, it doesn't even work with double. Oh, I didn't have my brace. Okay. Brace. Okay. Still doesn't work with double though. I change it to INT. Okay, so that works. Let's see if the greater than or equal to 90 works. I didn't like that. I find it so limiting that I don't find it really worthwhile to use. Can't use doubles. Appears like you can just put single numbers here, because I tried putting a Boolean and didn't like that Boolean expression. Day of week's 5, comes down here, does these. Day of week, 0, default 6. Okay, let me show you how this works. Just talk about it. Day of week is 5. This is checking, is like an if statement here. Can you have default at the top? Usually it's at the bottom. There's no requirement the case for default statement be in particular order. Oh, I hate having it at the top. But what this is checking is it's saying if day of week is equal to 0 or 6. If it's equal to 0, it does this. If it's equal to 6, it does this. Otherwise, if it's not equal to either 0 or 6, it does this default code. And then a break causes it to go down to the end of the curly brace here. Again, very limiting. It's a way of doing a if-else structure, a complicated one, in a fairly easy manner. Exam creators fond of switch statements are missing break statements. Here's some more examples. Oh, middle name is a string here. First name isn't defined. Okay, first name's right. Here's a string. Oh, middle name is not a final variable. Okay. Anyway, that's a switch statement. I used it one time in 13 years of programming. And the reason why is because we were, I had put in place a barcode system on a production floor. And so we had a barcode system, and the barcodes. So you got a barcode here, like on a bottle I'm looking at, bottle of water. It's got a barcode on it, and you can start a barcode off with like a prefix. Like we'd start off with WO, and then it'd be a number. We start off with .po, and then some kind of number. .sq, I think it was, for the sequence, then a number. Trying to remember what badges were. So it wasn't B. Um, let's say ID for identification. Then your identification number. By putting codes on the front of your barcodes, you ensure that you have less errors. You don't have as much bad data. Your garbage data is minimized. Have you ever gone to like Best Buy to buy something, and some of the things you had more than one barcode on it, and they would try to scan in the wrong barcode and it wouldn't work. Of course, they immediately realized it and they'd scan the other one. Well, imagine that it did take that previous barcode and put some garbage data in there. Maybe worst case, it even took a computer that should have cost $2,000 and ran it up as $10, and they didn't realize it. They just say, "Okay, your bill's $10." It's just like, well, okay, here's $10. I don't need change. Don't think too hard on it. Let me get out the door. Um, so what they do is they'll put the code on the front of it, and that makes sure that they know what it's scanning. Um, Now, they don't always do this. Sometimes you just rely on your people being trustworthy. The production manager, the way he put it to us is that people would screw off with our system if we didn't do this. He said he'd have people on their break up there with the barcode scanner. It's kind of fun doing a barcode scanner, and they'd be scanning their pop bottles or the back of their books. And he said we'd have so much garbage that we'd have to clean up on a weekly basis in that database if we didn't do this. Well, I don't remember how many of these I had, but I had a lot of them, um, maybe 20. And so what I did though with my program is I needed to capture this and then pick off this last part. Well, that wasn't too bad. I could have them scan the entire thing. But if they did a dot and the next character was a W and next character was an O, then I had to go to a particular part of the code in order to check this. And same with the .po and so forth. So if I'd had if else statements, I would have had 20 nested if else statements. Would have worked. But I decided at that point in time to use a case statement to simplify the coding. Typically, you don't need to do that. Get that to go away. Go. We've seen this already. We've seen a while loop. Again, just refresh your memory. You got a while. There's some kind of Boolean expression here, turns true or false. And while that's true, it'll go through and do all the lines of code in the body. The body is separated by or enclosed inside of curly braces if there's more than one line of code. If you got one line of code, you don't need the curly braces. Okay, so here we're bringing bytes of cheese. While bytes of cheese is greater than 0, and room and belly is greater than 0. Doesn't give us the calling sequence of this, but let's say bytes of cheese came in as 4. So I'm calling each cheese and I'm passing 4 in for bytes of cheese. So it comes down here and checks to see if my value of bytes of cheese, which is 4, is greater than 0. That would be true. And room and belly is greater than 0. Room and belly is 5 to begin with, so that'd be true. Since both of those are true, then it'll go through and do all the code in the while loop. Now, bytes of cheese and room and belly get decreased each time, so eventually one of those is not going to be true, and at that point it kicks out of the while loop. Here's an infinite loop. Why is that an infinite loop? Taking a look at it. Can't get that. Yeah, exactly. They probably meant for this to be y. If it was y, it'd make a little bit more sense. Then as y increased, then it eventually stopped. So really, whatever you have up in here in your condition, variable wise, should be something being done to it down in your loop of your or in your body of your while statement. So if you have a y here, you should have a y here. If you have an x here, you should have an x down here, and so forth. Do while I mentioned I don't really care for, but you can read that. I'm gonna skip over that. Practice might be difficult to determine when you should use a while loop and when you should use a do while. The idea behind it is a while loop, it does the Boolean check at the beginning. And so potentially you could never do the loop one time. The do while, it does the Boolean check at the end, in which case you know it's going to do the pass one time no matter what. Now this is kind of nice if you're trying to get input from the user. Do while I can understand why people use it because and this won't be Java code, but you'll get the idea. So here I say, do you want to continue? I ask a user that. And here I'm doing while continue is equal to yes. Then I'm going to do something. And then I have to ask them again. Do you want to continue? So if I say yes, I want to continue, it comes back up here, it checks, okay, is it still yes? The answer is still yes. So it goes through and does this again. Do you want to continue? They say no. Then it comes up here and says, do you want to continue? And it's now no. So it drops out of the for loop here. I had to, in this scenario, ask him twice, do you want to continue? With a do while, loop. You have to do here while continue is equal to yes. And if I don't get the right syntax on that, but you get the idea. Now here, I'll ask, do you want to continue? They'll answer yes or no. So I'm only asking them one time, do you want to continue? Well, what do I have to put in here to even get it to work then? Work the same way as this above one. If I put that in there, do something. Here, it says, do you want to continue? And they say, no. Then this is false, so it comes out here and ends the while. If they say yes, then it'll do something. Here, if they say no, well, it'll go down the next line of code and it'll do something, which we don't want. If they say no, we don't want to continue. So here, I'd either have to put, well, I have to put an if statement no matter what. I'd have to put an if continue is equal to no. Maybe I'd say break. So I'd break out of that, not break. I don't use these, so continue, I think it is. Bad choice of variable names. Continue. Continue means it drops out of the current loop and goes to the next iteration. Either way, it's clumsy. It's you fumble around. You have to put the if statement in here to check it. Here you do your else do something, or you could rely on the fact that you're breaking out of that current iteration, so you don't have to have the else. I know I have to ask the question twice here, but by asking the question twice, I don't have to put another decision in here, another if statement. Does that make sense on the difference between those two? Now, if you love do while, go ahead and use them. I don't care. I just rave on. Okay. For statement we looked at. Again, you got your initialization, you got your Boolean expression, you got your update statement. Initialization happens one time when it first goes into the for loop. Then it'll do a Boolean expression check, see if that's true or false, whatever you put in there. Then it'll go through and execute the body of your code. And then it'll come up and do the update statement, whatever that says, increase it by 1, increase it by 2, or whatever. And then it'll do the Boolean check again. And let's see, if true, exit loop, body executes, execute update statement, return to step 2, check the Boolean expression. Okay, so that really outlines it well. I never had thought about it that much, but in Java, in the Introduction to Computer Science this semester, I traced one of my for loops, and I could see it highlighting each one as it went through. And it made it very clear in my mind what was the order that it does those in. Sometimes you just use it so much you don't even think about how it's actually working. This prints numbers from 0 to 9, and we've already seen ones like that. So, oh, this is bizarre. No initialization. Boolean check. If it's blank, it's always true. And no change there. Though this for loop may look like it will throw a compiler error, it will in fact compile and run without issue. Is actually an infinite loop that will print the same statement repeatedly. This sample reinforces the fact that components of the for loop are each optional. Let's see. Well, sure enough, I've never left those blank in my life. But I suppose if you're doing your initialization somewhere else, you don't want anything there. If you're doing your increment somewhere else within the for loop, has to be within the for loop, then you don't want anything there. And I suppose I could, even in theory, if x is greater than 5, break out of my for loop there. So I wouldn't even need that. Only one. If statement's wrong, oh, if x is less than 5. X greater than 5. Yeah. Yeah, I guess all right. I guess you don't need anything there. How bizarre. There are programming languages that are like that. They'll have like a loop like that, and all it does is repeat infinitely, so it continues over and over, and you have to handle the break within the loop. Some have loop until. That's kind of the variation of like the do while. But yeah, there are some that are like that. Multiple terms. Oh wow, I never have done that. So it looks like your initialization can have multiple lines here. Ln y is equal to 0, z is equal to 4. Your Boolean can have ands or ors in it. I don't think I've tried that. Makes sense though. And you can have multiple lines here. X plus plus, Y plus plus. Three variations of for loop you may not have seen. That's true. I never have seen that. Let's see. Look at extra examples, none of which can recompile. So why would this one compile? Maybe that. Oh no, that isn't what the problem is. Because this is just done one time anyway. Okay, never mind. Y is equal to 0, x is equal to 4. Okay, that looks fine. Trying to figure it out without cheating, looking at the code or the text. I'm not seeing it. This example looks similar to the previous one, does not compile because of the initialization block. Difference is that x is repeated initialization block after already being declared before the loop. How come the difference to X is repeated initialized but after already being declared before the loop? I don't think that's a problem. I didn't get an error. Did this print what one time? Yeah. Now they're wrong about that. Okay. For ln y is equals 0, int x equals 4. Variables in initialization block must be the same type. Int y is equal to 3. Int z is equal to 5. Java language class not found exception. New class. Variable initialization block must be of the same type. Oh, okay, I see. So the int applies to both of these then. And the fact that I have something else there prevents me from putting x equals 1. Okay. So let me rethink this. That's why this one doesn't compile. It's not because x is already declared up here as an integer, so when I have it following this, it thinks it's a long. Okay, that makes sense then. Long y is equals 0, x equals 4, x equals 4. Does not compile. X is defined and then use the after loop. Oh, yeah, since it's these variables here can only be used within the for loop. Can't be used outside of the for loop. I should have caught that. That's a common mistake you'll see. We're ready for the for each, but only got 5 minutes left, so I think we'll stop there because this is going to take a little bit longer on the for each statement. Questions on anything? Still no assignment on this. This is all the items we've seen before, so you've already done assignments on everything we've looked at, pretty much. So if you're behind on any projects, use this time to your advantage to get caught up on them. But otherwise, we'll stop there.